You're listening to The Outcue, a 21 News journalist perspective on a top news story.
I am Assistant News Director Justin Mitchell, and this is The Outcue. And it has been an incredibly busy news week and an incredibly busy news summer leading up to this news week. And we could have picked any number of stories to discuss today, but the one that we're going to lean in on is the one that's getting the most attention right now around our community, which is the investigation and subsequent lawsuit filed related to allegations of hazing, sexual abuse, and child pornography at Ursuline High School, specifically the Ursuline football team. So with me today to discuss the work that we've done on this story, how we first heard about it, how we've been pursuing it, but also overall, how to pursue information about a story where there are virtually no public records and no sources reaching out to blow the whistle on anything on the record. And yet you're aware that if it's true, there's a compelling public need to know. So we've got Madison Tromler, who's been working on this all summer, and Robert McFerren, who's also been working along with me and the rest of the newsroom on how to pursue this stuff and how to be fair and get the news out there when some people may not want it to be. So let's just start with, this has been a story most of the summer, the alleged events, and I can't stress alleged enough. This is not a criminal case yet. There is a criminal investigation, but this lawsuit is civil. We don't know what did or didn't happen, but the allegations allegedly occurred on a football trip in June. So as we sit here now in September, there's been a lot of rumblings. So talk about how we first heard about this and what we've had to do to try and pursue it.
How did we first, because I know before the school initially put out a statement, there were some rumblings, right?
Yeah, and we were hearing in early July that something had happened on a trip, but again, private school.
Something with Ursuline.
Something involving the football team on a trip. Again, we were not even aware at that time they were on a trip, but then, Justin, you looked at the schedule as we started looking into things and looking at it, we found that they did indeed have their schedule of, their 41 players, where they were going, the 3 coaches that were taking them.
And there were, at one point, there was a social media account set up to specifically talk about these allegations. It existed for a short period of time. It had misspellings in it. It was very questionable. And the allegations were very extreme. Now, when I say very extreme, the allegations in this civil lawsuit are very extreme. The allegations on this social media page were more extreme than what's in the lawsuit. That doesn't see the light of day in a legitimate professional newsroom. That's a social media rumor, and rumors are not news. But sometimes there's truth behind them, and you got to start trying to chase it down to see what is or isn't true. So Robert, you mentioned we saw there was this football trip, and we knew at least a date range. Yep. So what do we start doing?
So, okay, we look at the date range. We know an approximate date, approximately, and then we're hearing possibly it involves something in Gainesville, Florida. So, all right. So, again, we're not sure where they are, but so we reached out to the college to see if an incident happened at the college. The college said they were unaware of anything. We reached out to the Gainesville police, who took a while to get back to us. I mean, it may have been a month and a half, maybe. It was weeks. It
might have even been more than that.
Yeah,
it was a while.
Yeah, who also said they had nothing in their records on this case. So what we thought was going to show us finally something, because, again, we're talking about a trip that's crossing many state lines, and we're unsure where the incident happened or the exact date, anything of the alleged incident took place.
And also unsure who knew what, when, and when. Yep. Well, back up. Or if there even was an alleged incident, because we are still checking out a rumor. Yep. But if it did happen, or at least the allegation of it happened, we don't know if the coaching staff knew. We don't know if they knew in Florida. Yep. We don't know if it occurred in Florida. We don't know, so we don't even know if there would be cause for a police report. But it's at least a thread to pull. Yep. So then we find out there is a police report. So, okay, this is a break in the case. We're going to finally get this. And that was even hard to get, because a police report, I've probably said it on this podcast before, but a police report is in Ohio is born a public record. It is a public record from the moment it is written. It does not have to be super complete, but there has to be an incident report. And I was having a hard time getting that from Youngstown. It was being reviewed by the law department. Not unusual, but a little unusual for just a run-of-the-mill report. But they did acknowledge that there was a detective, gave me the name that was investigating it, and said that the report existed. So I have something to push for. And I get it. And it looks like this.
Lots of wasted ink.
So, this is pushing the boundaries of what you can redact, but we don't know what we don't know.
But we know there's an investigation going on
Involving juveniles.
Yes.
Yes.
And we have a date range now that narrowed a little further. So now how do we move forward? Because this feels like a dead end.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but at this point in the timeline, is this where you guys saw on the Ursuline Facebook page the range of when they were on the trip and where they were going and lined it up with those days?
We saw that prior to getting this report. That was how we were able to craft a request for a report that would have been filed within such and such a time frame.
So then you guys get this, and then at this point, we had been and continue reaching out to the school and the diocese asking about this alleged incident.
Right. It puts us in an odd position because on the one hand, all the specifics are still very much in question. They are still based, as far as we know, on what could be a rumor and may not be true at all, except now we also know that whatever it is warrants a criminal investigation, so this can't be ignored anymore.
Right. Yes, and we continued asking the school for information and the diocese, because they are two separate, and we've learned that through this process. The diocese and the school and the principal are two separate entities, although the diocese, oversees the schools and everything. So we've, been in touch with both of them. And then finally, it was not that long ago, a couple weeks ago now, a few weeks ago, that the school district released an official statement about the incident. And you can imagine that as we were asking those questions, I think from what it sounded like, there was a lot of parents and families probably asking the district for information. So I think the district came out and wanted to dispel any alleged rumors, and the district, the one thing that stood out to me when I read their first initial statement in response to this, they did explain, they said, yes, there was an incident that happened on the school football
And what were they
trip
calling
in June.
the alleged incident? What were they?
Inappropriate behavior that happened on the school
Inappropriate
trip.
behavior was what they called it.
And they
yes.
made it clear, they said that in no way is the district trying to cover this up. Now, I would imagine that was probably a response to things that parents or people were saying, because obviously we would
didn't
never
say they
report.
covered it up.
Right, exactly.
Right, yeah.
So when they said that, and then I think after that statement, it was more, you guys can probably speak on this more, because I know you guys answer, the phone calls into the newsroom a lot, but a lot of people were like, we want more information about this.
And I think this is where people don't understand, like when an investigation like this happens, there's just trails you have to follow. There's never an instant, usually not an instant, I'm going to get an answer, on something that's this in depth,
Right.
And
Yeah.
as we were talking, I just thought I needed to look back at the main page of this report where it just has administrative things. But for the statute that they were investigating, because that's something that will sometimes tell you a lot, even if the narrative doesn't, it was listed as miscellaneous offense. So they didn't even list what the nature of this investigation was. So it created even more, and you've got minors involved. There are reasons for this, so I'm not casting aspersions necessarily on the fact that that's heavily redacted. It's just I'm painting the picture of we're in this position now where you're seeing comments all over the place where people are saying, like, everybody knows what happened here. Why isn't the media covering this? And they're, of course, talking about, people in the know who know each other who are talking about things. We don't know if what they know or what they think they know is accurate, but we know there's a criminal investigation.
And we had sources telling us things, but they weren't able to give us any proof either of anything that beyond what we had already heard.
Yeah, and everything we report has to either come from the school district or a public entity or what's now a lawsuit that has come out. But
the other way that we usually get these, because we've talked about this before, is that sometimes you have sources that you can vet and know that they are rock solid sources, and sometimes they can be anonymous, sometimes they're coming forward as whistleblowers, but we didn't have that here either.
Nope.
You had a
No.
lot of people
Nope.
saying everybody knows
No.
about this, but nobody willing to say, I'm firsthand involved
Yeah.
and I'm willing to speak.
Right. And then they kept saying, oh, everyone's just sweeping this under the rug. Well, it's not the case. We're looking into it, but I can't do anything with it.
Right, and I think at that point as journalists, and I know, and I mean even like when we learn in school and stuff, we know a fundamental thing of journalism is report what you know.
Right.
You start with what you know, but there are situations like this where there is a public interest, and obviously this is a major school here in downtown Youngstown. And lots of people want to know what's going on. So at that point, we are reporting to people because we get comments saying, well, asking for more details, like why didn't they report this? Why didn't we say this? So at that point, we are reporting what we don't know. Here's what we're asking, the district, and not yet getting a response for one reason or another, as the investigation, is ongoing with the Youngstown Police Department. But so at that point, that's what we've been doing, is reporting what we don't know. And I would argue in doing that, it does build up some public pressure to the point where the district, although they haven't given us a lot of new information, they've began to start responding. Right now they say they're working on a response for us for today, for today's
It's
news.
us doing the story in reverse of how we would normally do a story.
Yeah, inverting it. Usually what
Yep.
you see
Right.
on the air is we were asking questions, we got answers, and now we're delivering those answers to you. But every now and then there's a story like this where we don't know if we're ever going to get the answers or how this is going to break, but we know that there's a way that it can all just go away, and the parties involved may prefer that. But it can't, because there's a public interest, there are people's children involved, there is the reputation of a district and the football program to consider also. That's a thing we haven't touched on yet, is that, to be fair, when you are considering what you don't know what it is you don't know. So you have a vast area, meaning that you might not know something exculpatory, something mitigating, something that makes this not as bad as what you're hearing.
Right, and we don't know. I mean, we don't know that that anyone involved or anyone in the diocese or the school, necessarily wants this to go away. Maybe they're handling this the best way that they know how, and they're trying to, cross their T's and dot their I's. When you have sort of, as you were talking about earlier, Justin, kind of so many different things going on. We have the new lawsuit. We have the YPD investigation, and what else do we have?
Well, I mean, those are the dueling things we have right now, but we also have the future of the football program and this season. The season's underway. And you have one thing that is not deniable here is that you do have a very powerful football culture in this valley and surrounding particularly schools like Ursuline. And so for everybody who says, I want all the information to come out, this is wrong, that it would be secret, we need to know everything and really play this out, they're also maybe going too far and already calling for consequences before this is played out, and it's not time for that yet until you do know all the details. You also, for every one of them, have at least an equal number and probably a larger number who are just concerned with the score on Friday night, and they want this to go away because they're just a fan of the football program, or they're an alumni, or they're a donor, or whatever it is that they are. There are definitely people who, on balance, would rather this be handled quietly and go away.
Yep.
And I'm not saying who specifically, we could just be talking about, run-of-the-mill fans, but we know that those people exist. And so if in our position as watchdogs, that there is at least an interest, maybe not an effort to hide something, but there are people that would be interested in hiding it or downplaying it. You have to take that into account, and you also have to walk this very careful balance where, just like you're not tar and feathering the program or the players until you know everything, you also can't trust anybody here, meaning when the diocese says they can't comment, when the school says they can't comment, when the police say they can't comment, all of that might be legit, but you have to keep in your mind that they also might not want to because they want this to go away. And if you don't know which one it is, all you can do is keep asking the questions and let people know whether they were willing to answer them and what their reasoning was.
Right. And YPD, I know recently I was asking them, is it uncommon for an investigation like this to take this long? And they said, no, not necessarily, but at what point, does it become that way? And it's our job to continue asking those questions. And
talking, more than a dozen kids, you got coaches, so across multiple states, there's a lot that they have to go through and do checking on to see what took place.
I mean, figure this. If you've got that many people, and okay, let's just, for the sake of argument, pretend that there is some fire where all this smoke is. You're going to have to interview 20-some people. And then if there are discrepancies in anybody's stories, you're going to have to go back and trace those discrepancies. You're going to have to eliminate some people. You're going to have to add some people. You're going to learn new things.
You're going to have to go back to the hotels they stayed at or the colleges they stayed at and see what they have.
You're probably looking at things like surveillance video. You're probably issuing subpoenas. I don't know any of this. I want the viewer, though, to really consider how labor intensive this would be.
Yeah, that's exactly right, because the lieutenant who's leading this case in the juvenile division in the Youngstown Police Department told me and said that I can report this. They are still gathering information. And this was about a week ago. But as far as we know, the investigation is ongoing.
And then, Madison, you've just learned today that new witnesses/victims have come forward as recently as since this suit was filed yesterday.
Yes. The lead counsel of this federal civil rights lawsuit said since yesterday they've heard from 2 to 3 victims and or witnesses who have since come forward. And I know yesterday, I remember, Justin, that the attorney, they had, when I was interviewing him, he had mentioned that he wanted or would have liked to get information out there to say, hey, if anyone has any information, let us know. But it sounds like, as soon as this lawsuit came out, they did start to hear from some others. So we are not sure at this point what those allegations are, but I did hear from one of the lead attorneys that things could change and evolve.
And when that happens, this takes longer.
Yes.
So that's a thing that people need to remember also. And that gets into the role that media does play in this. Media accounts were cited in this lawsuit, I would argue overplayed a bit because the lawsuit would have happened anyways, and there was a lot of information in those suits that we didn't know, so we didn't bring light to them. But if those people came forward since that suit was filed, they wouldn't have known that suit was filed if we weren't trying to get this information on it steadily and report what's in the lawsuit. So there is a little bit of a cycle here. And what's it about? It's about getting to the truth, one way or the other. If this is all going to lead nowhere and fall apart, well, then there are 3 coaches and a bunch of players who are owed a lot of apologies by somebody. If there's any truth to any of this, then there is accountability that is warranted. Neither of those things happen if it's left to a small handful of people who may not want this to go anywhere. So we can amplify, basically. We can amplify what is solid. And so that leads me, I guess, to the final point, which is where we go from here, because yesterday was a major story, but it's nowhere near the end of this. There are so many things. We don't know where the lawsuit's going to play out. They could add new defendants. We don't know the employment status.
And the names, there's parents who players' name, but the parents' names are saying they're working on getting more information on who all's going to be named in this lawsuit.
Yeah, and people are wondering, what does this mean for the football season? Are there going to be football games? And we have no indication as of now that any games are being canceled or anything like that. And also, one thing I wanted to add is that the lead counsel of the federal civil rights lawsuit said that the alleged victims involved have been receiving some intimidating or sort of threatening communication from some people, families that were allegedly involved in this incident, and that's something that the attorney said is causing a lot of hardship for the family and PTSD for the victims involved.
Now, and to that, I will also point out, and this is brand new information, so there's work that needs to be done on it. That's coming from this attorney. But if there are intimidating or threatening communications, that is in and of itself potentially criminal.
Yes.
And I say that because the attorney saying it happened is not documentation of it. So that would be another layer of investigation that needs to be worked out. Probably a new police report filed, probably a new arm to the investigation, possibly ancillary charges. We don't know who's threatening. I mean, it's what if it turned out that the person who was allegedly threatening them was just a fan who doesn't know if any of this is true. They just want them to stop, and now they're not involved, and they're a separate investigation. You could have a case. You could have a case where everybody's innocent except for one person making a phone call.
Right, and this is where social media people go out and comment. Well, they could be pulled into a case where you said blank on this because it's being watched.
And social media played a role in this lawsuit also in a number of ways. They, the attorneys for the plaintiffs, cited Facebook comments that were made about allegations of a cover-up, and they pointed to a changed headline of ours because it was originally a statement attributed to the diocese, thinking they were one entity acting together, and they noticed that the diocese had pointed out the distinction, and we changed the headline to make it clear the statement was coming from the high school. That's how granular this stuff gets, though.
Right, and it's interesting because once it gets into this sort of territory, we're hearing more from the diocese. Maybe things that we did, a phone call we don't usually get. Hey, not diocese, say the school. But just recently, I remember getting a memo of like, hey, if you need to reach the principal, like I'm the one to talk to, the spokesperson of the diocese. So you kind of start to notice like they are. The principal is the principal of the school, and it is its own entity. The diocese oversees them, but we're starting to kind of see where the communication and the way that they work, is separate in some ways,
And you're also seeing a little bit more responsiveness from, there was a long stretch there where Matt Sammartino, who is named in this lawsuit, he's the principal of Ursuline, and he wouldn't respond to us at all directly. And the diocese would then tell us, I got nothing, you really should reach out to Matt Sammartino. And we would, and we wouldn't get anything. And now we've gotten 2 statements. They have not said much, but they have acknowledged the situation. And like you mentioned, the superintendent of the Catholic schools is working on a statement for us today.
Right, and from my reporting, at least what I've noticed is that I would say the diocese, Dennis Biviano is the spokesperson of the diocese, and Dr. Stephen Jones, although I did just recently meet him, but so far they've been more responsive than the school principal.
And I will say Dennis has always responded to me, often to say, I can't say anything about this. This
That's
is a
what
Matt
I'm saying,
Sammartino
right? He's
thing.
very responsive.
But Dennis is a former reporter, and he does know how this works. So looking forward, we just want to get to the truth. If people know things, we want them to come forward with what they know. Let the chips fall where they may. So no one's out to tar and feather anybody here. Nobody is out to say that anybody definitely did something wrong, whether that be the original allegations or this idea that there's a cover-up. I think people need to understand exactly how complicated this has gotten since June.
And we just follow the truth, but we have to know what the truth is, and we have to be able to verify it. So.
And so that gets back to what our role was here, and will be in a situation like this, is if we quit asking questions, this becomes updates on a court docket. And that doesn't get a lot of attention, and anything can easily go away. And at this point, it's risen to a level where no matter what the outcome is, it would be unfair to go away quietly, because it's either accountability is going to be demanded or retraction of allegations if they're proven not to be true. Both of those are of the utmost importance. And so
it's about accountability and fairness.
And both of those would have factions behind them that would have a vested interest in rather letting it go away. So our role simply has to be to keep reminding them that we're looking, the public needs and deserves an answer here. And why do they need and deserve an answer? Because this is not just about a football program, this is about people's children. The allegations are coming from an incoming freshman. These are young people.
Right, and I the people who obviously, they don't want to see something, negative going on. No one does, of course. We never want to have to like report these types of things. But I suppose, when people are, worried, if there is anyone out there worried about, how this affects Ursuline or the football program, I suppose, holding people accountable in a situation like this can, create a better future for that school and the program.
Serious allegations, but serious ramifications. This affects real people who live in our community. And if this is happening, that's why we do this, is to help.
And not to speculate, but what if this has happened before so many times and was never reported?
Which is alleged in this lawsuit, so that's not speculating too far out of field here. They're alleging that this is a cultural thing, and that it's well known and understood that that's the way it is.
Right. Yep. And with the attorney I was speaking with yesterday, leading the case, said, this in his, he's alleging that this could be seen as, up there in the nation as, one of the worst types of hazing cases that happen, so it's not so it's pretty serious, what they're alleging here.
Yeah. So any final thoughts?
Well, I just wanted to add that what we're kind of working on also is figuring out what the laws are in regards to, does a student have to be suspended by law, or does a coach or a teacher have to, be disciplined by law, or is there a law or a guideline out there that says a season must be canceled or postponed? So that's what we're trying to look into, and it's sort of clear, but still sort of unclear. But a lot of it is we have to wait for this investigation to play out.
And I think there are layers here. Obviously the reporting we've done so far has centered around this civil lawsuit yesterday. The standard to prove a civil case is a lower legal standard than proving something criminal. For those of you who remember, the famous example of that is O.J. Simpson, who was acquitted of murder but found civilly liable for the deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. So it's a lower standard. So you have a civil case where they could very well prove that damages should be awarded, but it not rise to the level of criminal. How could that happen? You couldn't begin to guess how that could happen, because right now all we know are the allegations in the civil complaint. The criminal investigation will take longer because it has to go much further, because it has to hit a much higher standard. Civil cases, it's the preponderance of the evidence. Does it look and talk like a duck? Then it's a duck. Criminal, it is beyond a reasonable doubt. Now think about a reasonable doubt for a moment here. That means that when you've considered this case, you can't think of anything in the reasonable realm of imagination that could have happened other than this. That's a very high standard to reach, and I don't think people really think about it like that. But it would have to be so clear that there is no reasonable way anybody could consider that it didn't happen. So that's you need a lot more evidence for that. It's going to take a lot longer. Lots of video. Yeah, which allegedly exists. We haven't seen it. It allegedly will be entered into evidence, and then that would come into play. We don't know if the criminal investigators have that video yet. You would assume, but we don't know.
Right? Yeah, that's true.
And then the football program we mentioned, will there still be a season? All indications seem like yes, because the Ohio High School Athletic Association told you today they don't get involved in these matters until they've been adjudicated elsewhere.
Right.
And then it appears from their website that they take action against individuals, which in this case would mean a lot of individuals if action were to be taken, and it could derail a season, but the odds of this being done before the end of the football season are nil. I mean, there's just no way.
No. Right, yeah, and from what I was reading too, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounded like it could impact a season, or there could be, disciplinary action, but it's not clearly laid out like this is what happens if this happens,
Right, the way their personal conduct policy is written, it really refers to the student and the action taken against the student. So
right, but one thing that we did see under the Ohio Revised Code is that our understanding of the law is that school teachers, anyone, coaches, any faculty member is to immediately report any of these incidents to the appropriate school authorities. And at this point, the lawsuit alleges that maybe there was some time that passed, but we don't know that for sure.
Right. That's a central question to a lot of
Yes.
things, to a lot of this is, and that's another layer. They've got to prove that this really happened, but then they'd also have to figure out if the people in charge dropped the ball,
Right.
and if they did, was it knowingly? So that's a lot too.
Yep.
These are coaches with some history. I mean, one of the assistant coaches, I wrote a story 5 years ago about him leaving amidst allegations as a champion coach. And the lawsuit goes into some more vague allegations against the head coach, Dan Reardon. But he left and came back, and there was some controversy about that. So this is multi-pronged, is my point.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's probably something that, we're going to be reporting for quite some time.
One would imagine.
Yeah.
At least into next year. I can't imagine that this isn't into next year. So I say all of that, and I thank you guys for helping sift through this and hopefully bring a little bit of understanding to what we know, what we don't know, and how we're going to continue to pursue getting more information. There are no agendas here. This is just about getting to the truth. Whatever the truth is, this has reached a fever pitch where people certainly have a right to it, and it is our role to simply keep the pressure on to make sure we can get at the truth. And you can help us get at the truth by letting us know if you know anything about this story or any other story that you think we should look into. And you can reach us at news@wfmj.com, watchdog@wfmj.com, at 330-744-8821, or you can message us on Facebook Messenger or Blue Sky. And any of these work. You can also send us a letter. We don't prefer that because it takes longer and it's much easier lost, but have at it. And until next time, this has been the Outcue.